Hello, everyone. Welcome to this free webinar introducing what we've learned so far as part of the Breaking the Silence initiative. My name is Oluchi. I volunteer at Quetzal as a community connector. Today, I'll be your main technical support person. I will ensure you're admitted back into the room and answer any technical questions you may have. So please do not hesitate to chat me up directly. I will also share a few housekeeping points. Please make sure your microphones are on mute to ensure everyone has an enjoyable experience here. And please put all questions and comments in the chat, and everything will be attended to at the end of the session. So like I mentioned before, the session is being recorded. So if you want to change your name or turn off your camera, that is completely fine. So with no further ado, I'd like to introduce Deborah Knight, our new Chief Executive at Quetzal. She would be opening the floor, followed by Dr. Marie Lefebvre, who will be providing details on the project. So, hi, Deborah.
Hi, thanks very much. So, hi everyone, welcome and thank you for joining us today. So the purpose of today's session is for us to talk about the Breaking the Silence initiative. So we'll share the learning so far and hopefully gather some of your views and opinions about our planned next steps. So the Breaking the Silence project is a 3-year project funded through the Tampon Tax Fund and a co-partnership between Comic Relief and the Department for Media, Culture and Sports. The main aim of the project was to assess the effectiveness of using a community-based approach to increase Quetzal's engagement with South Asian women in Leicester. So although this broadly covers the idea behind the project, as you can imagine, the project had many different elements and sub-aims, and Marie will discuss these in more details as she shares the results we've had so far. So the reason we have chosen to run this webinar, particularly on the 1st of June, is that it marks the first day of Volunteers Week. So this National Week of Recognition is the perfect time to share the learning from this project, because the whole project and all of its accomplishments would not have been achievable without the contribution of volunteers. So the ongoing commitment of all the volunteers who have given their time has been absolutely vital to achieving the aims of the project. And we at Quetzal are extremely proud of all the work that the group has put in. I've not been with Quetzal through the whole life of the project, but I was lucky enough to witness the transformative effect of the introduction of the community connectors. So once the connectors were recruited, the effectiveness of the project increased dramatically. And if I didn't know the power of volunteers before, I certainly did after that point. It's also important to mention the amazing contribution made by our local partners, who have collaborated with us to help us extend the reach of the project and have introduced us to creative ways to connect with individuals and communities within Leicester. Many of these partners are here today, and we want to thank you for giving your time and having interest in the initiative. As with everyone here, we faced significant challenges due to COVID. We had to completely rethink the delivery of large parts of the planned work, which were no longer possible due to the pandemic. But in some ways, this benefited us as we had to think outside the box, utilise the power of the internet, and actually, without being restricted by geography, we were potentially able to meet more people than we perhaps otherwise would have. Of course, none of it would have been possible without the women who shared their experiences and the dedication and skill of Marie, who has led the project from the outset. She's worked tirelessly developing the contacts and utilising the community-based approach to raise awareness of the trauma of childhood sexual abuse, its effects, and Quetzal services amongst South Asian communities in Leicester. I'd also like to thank Lorraine, who provides the counselling part of the work and has played a crucial role in gathering evidence for the research element of the project. I'll hand over now to Marie, who will talk about the project in more depth, what we've learned so far, and what's next.
Thank you, Deborah, for the warm welcome on setting the scene for us. My name is Marie Lefebvre. I work part-time at Quetzal. I have 2 roles. I'm a development officer supporting with funding, monitoring, on reporting to funders, and I'm also the project facilitator for the project. I want to thank you, everyone here today. Actually appreciate your presence. All of you together here contributes to the Breaking the Silence initiative. By being here today, sometimes by sending an email, a retweet, even there is many people that are actually not here today, they are also contributing to it. But I think more importantly is about a reflection of what it is to be a community, what are the steps we can take to enhance our communities' well-being and mental health, on making our members more trauma-informed so that they can signpost others towards help and support. So Deborah thanked numerous individuals, including our volunteers, the female survivors, our numerous collaborators. I also want to thank, again, Comic Relief. Our new grant manager, Rina Mehta, is here with us today. So thank you. I hope through sharing our learning, it will support the application process of organizations and partners who decide to embrace a community-based approach, as well as the funders in their review process so that we can continue doing great work in enhancing our community's mental health. So let me share now my presentation. So today I will go through the Quetzal Breaking the Silence initiative, giving you some backgrounds, the aim and objectives. I will share key term and definition, what is the community-based approach, and especially asset-based community development, which is the philosophy that I subscribe to. What is the South Asian community, our process, describing year on year what we've been doing, and obviously showing you the stories of change at the end. The key learning about the community-based approach, our next step, and then I will close and answer any questions. Today, to support community learning today, I will invite you to use the hashtag Quetzal Stories of Change. And then obviously I will mention through the presentation different organizations. So don't hesitate to share in the chat website link or any other resources. So in terms of the background, so the Breaking the Silence initiative is for Quetzal, a significant story of change. Quetzal is a charity in Leicester, which over a 30-year period has developed a range of counseling provision for female survivors of shadow sexual abuse, all provided for free. Since 2016, with the coverage of important cases in the media about shadow sexual abuse and also increased awareness about mental health issue, Quetzal experienced a surge in the number of female survivors coming through the service. Quetzal sadly started to support approximately 300 female survivors per year. The demographic accessing Quetzal were predominantly older Caucasian women who for many years kept the secret of their abuse. Quetzal never needed to advertise really about their services. Through word of mouth, a simple search on the internet, referrals from GP, people would find Quetzal. Knowing the diversity of people in Leicester, there was a desire to reach out to a wider and diverse community of female survivors, especially in Leicester, where almost 38% of the population, according to the census 2011, is from Asian descent. So why are South Asian females not reaching out for Quetzal? Why, despite a diverse counselor pool, only 29% of our current city clients are being supported by Quetzal? I need to put a note on that number, that at the time Quetzal was delivering long-term counseling with female survivors saying 1 to 2 years or 3 years sometimes with us. So this 29% of the current clients in 2018 is a very, very tiny number of female survivors, on not many referrals. On what can we do to make our charity more accessible to South Asian survivors? A journal paper written by Harrison and Jill called Breaking Down Barriers, Recommendation for Improving Sexual Abuse Reporting Rates in British South Asian Communities, provided the necessary inspiration to bring together the Breaking the Silence initiative. The paper briefly considers why British South Asian women and children do not report sexual abuse, then focuses on the working practices of the non-governmental agency that supports such women. The recommendation brought forward was about adopting the community-based approach, increasing the community involvement, doing some outreach work, having survivor groups on mentor schemes, and through that, an increase in reporting was witnessed. Quetzal was not specifically interested in supporting an increase in reporting of sexual abuse to the police, although we've seen through the project that female survivors, some female survivors ended up reporting to the police as a result of their counseling support. What we wanted to know is whether or not a community-based approach would increase the number of referrals from South Asian female survivors. So for this, we gave us our aim to measure the effectiveness of a community-based approach to raise awareness about the trauma of shadow sexual abuse and the value of counseling in South Asian communities living in Leicester. And we had three objectives. First, to set up a web-based self-help guide for South Asian female survivors to help them address common issues and gain confidence to seek further support. So a brand new website with a web chat facility and the possibility to refer themselves directly using the website, a self-help guide where they could understand better the trauma of shadow sexual abuse with some self-care tips as well. But also it was useful for people who knew them to read the guide on an awareness raising strategy. The second objective was to support counseling support to this group of women. We decided to have a model of 16 weeks of counseling support with them. They are more than welcome to come again after 4 months of taking a break. Originally, the plan was to provide the counseling in health centers across the city to ease the access to counseling, and with the support of 8 volunteer counselors. This changed through the course of the project for a variety of reasons, including the pandemic, and I will touch upon that later. The third objective was to adopt new methods, evaluation, and learning approaches to improve organization learning and reflection processes through an external evaluation process, and to facilitate the sharing of knowledge with partners across Leicester, Leicestershire, and Rutland. So we did this by bringing an external evaluator to provide us with a baseline and to do an evaluation at the end of the project. We implemented also developed tools to capture the learning and stories from the people. I use a spreadsheet for doing this with all the partners and people I encounter through the project. And the volunteers and dedicated counselor also provide ongoing feedback about their successes and challenges. The method evaluation learning approaches are key within the community-based approach. You see there are 2 ways to support the development of a community. We can do this through a study on the data we collect, and the other way it is through the stories we share. So collating those stories are important so we can eventually share it and support community transformation. So what is a community approach and what is the South Asian community? There are different perspectives on a community-based approach. The central idea is that community members take an active role in participating, highlighting, and addressing the issue that matters to them. I subscribe particularly to the concept of asset-based community development developed by McKnight and Quetzal at the Institute of Policy Research in Northwestern Illinois in the United States. They got this book that is interesting to read. After a training with Cormac Russell from Nurture Development somewhere in Croydon in 2019. So asset-based community development builds on the assets that are found in community and mobilizes individuals, associations, and institutions to come together to realize and develop their strength. By asset, I mean gift, talent, other type of resources, information that can potentially be shared. From the start, an asset-based approach spend time identifying the assets of individual, association, institution that form the community. The identified assets from an individual are matched with people or groups who have an interest or a need for those strengths. The key is beginning to use what is already in the community, then to work together to build on the identified assets of all involved. Using the ABCD model, how can we define the South Asian community? So I took a while to unpack the term South Asian communities, considering aspects, such as faith, culture, where they lived in Leicester, how long they've been in the UK, which countries they were from, the level of English fluency, and more. This got me very confused on how to define them as such. So ABCD got a way of helping us describe communities in different groups, and I use this to keep track of my to keep track of the list of people I met through the project. First of all, the South Asian community is made up of a variety of individuals with different gifts and talents that they can share with people around them. And I've met many, and there are many in Leicester in particular, female survivors. To give you an example, one of their gifts is their stories on journey that prompt people to be more empathetic and put in place steps to support them better in their journey, for example. Then there are the association where people come together to discover each other's gifts, cooking club, art club, gardening club, yoga classes, gardening group. They do not have specifically control of assets as such, but they engage with one another. Then there are the institutions that control assets where people pay for, people are paid to deliver a service. So school, university, organizations, council, the police, all our partners that are actually delivering valuable work to support female survivors in the area. So the members of this institution may not all be of South Asian descent, South Asian by ethnicity, but by being representative of those institutions, they are part of the South Asian community in Leicester because they can use their asset, their knowledge, their expertise to support people in their journey. So this is very interesting to bear in mind as well. And their place-based asset is what kind of give people a reason, a reason of why they live where they live. So community center, health centers, the parks, the hub of activity, the coffee shop and restaurant. This is the place where people love to go. And then in between, there are connection. Individuals who sit between community group and institution or between place assets on, in between. So for anyone here who is having extracurricular activities outside of work, a trustee or a volunteer at a local group, or enjoy to go to certain parks or restaurants in your local area, you are a connection. You can share resources and information on assets with other people. Having defined the South Asian community on the community-based approach, let's talk about the process. So ABCD provides a step-by-step process that you can find on the Mutual Development website that you can have a look at in details and even bring a consultant to support you in your journey. I use some of the tools from ABCD. I also decided to be more agile in my process to nurture relationship at a human level and see what stories would emerge from this, and then go through a process of reflection by comparing my process against the ABCD process afterwards. It is also because I think the process is ideal to do prior to the project and at the end of the project. And I was pretty much dealing with a set plan when I arrived at Quetzal. And although I introduced the idea of ABCD, it was probably not the right battle for me to choose at the time. So I hit the track running with all the deliverables that I needed to complete. But there is, in many aspects, we did follow the ABCD process. So first year, collecting the stories on mapping the assets. I arrived in the middle of the year at Quetzal. On the middle of the first year, the project already started 6 months in the making. Quetzal was made of an admirable, hardworking, understaffed team at the time. They were in a period of transition with no CEO, some staff withdrawing from Quetzal and leaving. The team of trustees was stepping in operational role, and they were just, wonderful and happy to have me, and they did their best so I will stay and make Quetzal my home. I was in a discovery stage at the time, so people probably saw me. I was on my bicycle going to different places in Leicester to drop leaflets, talk to people, well, in places in Leicester where there were higher proportion or were known to have a higher proportion of people from South Asian backgrounds. And I had about 40 unstructured conversations, either face-to-face, on the phone. I attended 2 community events at the time in these first 6 months. I observed and experimented nurturing connection in 1 sport class, and I had 1 focus group with counselor to start mapping different groups I could engage with. At the end of the first year, had about 87 connections in Leicester, on 24 connections beyond Leicestershire. And it includes actually organizations such as Quetzal in Coventry. I know Manjit Rial is here today, who really give us a lot of insight about the community approach that they adopted. And I also secured counseling room at health centers as well. There were 3 stories that were very important within this first year. The sport leader came coming back in the conversation as being central for the community-based approach. The community centers, the counselor, partner agencies encouraged me to get in touch with them and infiltrate them with staff and volunteers on nurture relationship by going to the session. I experimented through a yoga class delivered both in Belgrave and Foss Community Center by keeping notes of my experience. I made connection through the course, including meeting the videographer who is here with us today, meeting a psychotherapist, working the crisis team, and also a survivor of child sexual abuse and more. And then over time, actually, the yoga practitioner who is also a community art organizer, we continued talking and eventually it led to a collaboration. I contacted other sport leaders, but I guess there were quite a lot of resistance to start engaging or developing a collaboration, especially because Quetzal didn't really have the best brand image at the time. This is my guess. Yeah, so this was one point to put forward. And then it requires a lot of capacity to do that. And proximity is the process as well, if you really want to engage with the sport activity. So I felt at the time that I probably need some support. The second challenge was the language requirement to engage with certain communities. I had a community leader engage with in Belgrave. He wanted me to do the presentation on introduction in Gujarati to a particular group. Quetzal only provide counseling exclusively in English. So we didn't want to give the wrong impressions by sharing information in different language when actually we couldn't support female survivors who preferred counseling in different language. So this kind of made us think about who do we want to appeal to and engage with, professional maybe, younger South Asian female, it started to kind of narrow down who we will engage with before. And then there is the female survivors' perception of Quetzal. So I went to a panel discussion in North Evington. I went to this panel discussion, and there I met 2 survivors of childhood sexual abuse after asking a question to the panel on introducing myself on the project. Always ask a question as a panel discussion if you want to be identified. And so then the first female survivors, both of them were South Asian. The first one, she was so grateful about her experience at Quetzal. And this led actually for us to nurture a relationship to the point that she participated to our last AGM. She delivered a BBC radio interview as part of the project, and she's now an advisory as part of our clinical group. The second person, she was not happy at all, and it has been, according to her, approximately a year she has been waiting to start counseling with Quetzal. She did mention that she was happy for me to be introduced to her network, but we needed to provide some type of incentives, financial incentives, to get the female survivors to get engaged with us. For me, at the time, Quetzal, was seen in a bad light. We had 6 to 9 months wait for counseling at the time. And then I thought to myself, it is best that she first complete the counseling with Quetzal before I engage with the group as well. So it was a very, it really made me think that really we needed to sort out things at Quetzal first, as such. So it led us to modify the project, including recruiting a dedicated counselor to actually deliver the project and give us some more insight. And then volunteer connectors to enhance our image on a reputation, and that will probably appeal to a younger group of South Asian in Leicester. So in the first year, we achieved 10 referrals on 0 new starts. So 0 South Asian female survivors started counseling. So engage and execute. In the second year between January and March, it was business as usual. My goal was to recruit and engage volunteer connectors, recruit a dedicated counselor, continue to go to events and deliver important deliverables, including the website, the self-help guide, and more. Then the coronavirus hit, and I had to go back to our collected stories. I encountered people talking about community media, giving me contact to the local radios as a means to reach out. I had a very fruitful conversation with John Custer, lecturer at DMU, involved with the Zintia Trust on Doc Media Center. And he introduced me during the pandemic to Dr. Rob Wasson, who asked on his question a very pertinent question. What is the role of community media in supporting community development? So I listened to many episodes on the podcast because it invites people from Leicester in particular to come along. And I was able to contact quite a few of them. He has a very, very good interview with Cormac Russell about asset-based community development and the role of stories in transforming communities. It was important at this point to develop relationship with community radios and podcasters in Leicester. Is what I did, and develop our website on social media platform, on newsletter. We started a newsletter as well, telling the stories of communities and individuals supporting female survivors in Leicester. Not only our story, but also other people's stories for them to contribute to our platform. Apart from this little review of the collected story, Quetzal was ready to engage and execute the plan despite all circumstances. And during the pandemic, we increased our capacity with 3 new staff, a CEO, administrator, fundraising business manager, 5 volunteer connectors, 1 dedicated counselor, 7 trustees, 1 placement student. And we demonstrated agility by embracing remote working, delivering counseling online, streamlining our services and processes, reducing our waiting list to 3 to 6 months, through new counseling formats, and more, including a new CRM system that really helped ensuring our data was of the highest quality. In September, we launched our new website on the self-help guide. From the self-help guide, and at the request of community called the War Be the Change in Leicester, we developed the online awareness raising session, which we continue as of today, as of this year, to deliver online. The 5 volunteer connectors recruited through DMU University supported us to develop the recruitment, training, and supervision process. I encourage them to define for themselves their goals and objectives, as well as the methods that they want to use to raise awareness. I had one volunteer, she used her telephone and called every single one of her contacts to let them know about Quetzal. Others did some presentation. They also used the power of social media, wrote articles, and really kind of started to create a very integrated visual culture. Interestingly, through the experience, we had some learning with some men disclosing. So community, there is some ripple effect of the community approach with some men starting to disclose and encourage them just to do some collaboration with other agencies, such as First Step in Leicester. They did emphasize on the language needs, really made us think that we really hoped to have multilingual counseling at Quetzal, and there was some safeguarding risks that we had to pay attention to, because they were engaging with younger individuals who may have had siblings within their home under the age of 18. So we really have to up our training to ensure that they come back to us if there is a risk for a child, if there is a child at risk. I met with the dedicated counselor every 6 months to go through a review process, and she gave us some insights on the client mode of engagement. So there was a higher likelihood of contact details change while they were on the waiting list, but also when they started counseling, they tend to either change, there were a tendency to change number on email. So this was interesting to know. There was very much a lack of privacy within the home during the pandemic, with female survivors having to do counseling in their cars, on the step of their houses, at their neighbors, which we which we were very vocal about in later campaign, a strong desire to change their community, very much so. And they expressed a preference for a counselor who is not from their ethnic backgrounds, which created some dissonance between the language requirement that we heard earlier. And obviously, the first cohort, there are a lot of complaints about the waiting time because some of the females have been on the waiting list for quite some time before being seen. So eventually, when the lockdown restriction lifted, we made special provision to provide the counseling at Quetzal building for them to come through. They did mention the fact that they prefer not having the counseling in other in the community because they didn't want to be recognized or being seen. And on our referral form, we had a question about the language preference. Also in the second year, we had 5 community radio interventions. We wrote 30 written blog posts, including blog written by external partner, 12 community intervention, and we saw an increase in the social media growth. These are some of the things that we organized. A writing workshop with a writer called Divya Gilani. We collaborated with Leicester about sexual violence, the University of Leicester. We worked with Leicester Education Business College with a Crush the Hush COVID-19 edition. This was probably one of the best campaigns. It was identified as the best campaign by NCS nationally. And it really supported us to increase the number of 16 to 17, going from 1 to 8 in that particular year, referring themselves to Quetzal. And then for the white ribbon, we encourage everyone to promise to give privacy by sharing the story of female survivors having to do their counseling, in places, in a very creative way, I would say, because they are so committed for change. The number of referrals in the second year went up 24. You can see a dip in April and June where we are in the midst of the pandemic, and then an increase again when we actually demonstrated that counseling remotely was possible. On 22 new starts. Self-mobilization through association. When we have a better grasp of our network on their stories, it is easier to self-mobilize on use assets, on engage in collaboration. This is what we've experienced in year 3. As such, this year, a new volunteer connector joined Quetzal, Laura. She had a specific interest in gardening, and so I engaged with the conservation volunteers, and one of their staff members, Samantha, who is a community gardener, and she developed gardens throughout the city, and it was a good way to be outside with people already. And she introduced us to various communities in Beaumont Lodge, but also in Belgrave. There is a group that supports female from South Asian descent. And we started working on an online session called Let's Get Growing this spring to engage with the large community of people interested in both gardening and environmental issues in Leicester. In Leicester, you have the Hindu and Muslim climate group, actually. And some of the volunteer connectors, Deborah, for example, decided to focus our energy in communication with the student communities on campus and in the Instagram Live with the DMU Sikh Society. We also did a lot of campaign with the Student Volunteering Week with one of other volunteers doing a panel discussion. And for the It's Not Okay campaign, we had an interview on BBC Asian Network where one of our survivors actually shared our knowledge. And the last collaboration is Waste Wellbeing. The yoga practitioner that I met at the beginning, we developed a very strong collaboration and connection, and we came up with this program called Waste to Wellbeing to provide tools and knowledge to communities about mental health and well-being. And Quetzal actually did a session as part of this program. And we had 2 radio interventions as well, and our leaflets are throughout the city. So in total, Quetzal welcomed 8 community connectors. I want to say a big thank you to all the community connectors for delivering intervention on developing appealing content, amplifying the stories of survivors. So thank you. You are definitely the story of change and really supported me throughout the way, and all very much inspiring. So these are some of them here. So as mentioned, what about mobilizing the survivors? as mentioned, the survivors, according to the counselor, had a stronger desire compared to other females she engaged with before to create change in their community. And some of them are really involved in creating change already by doing amazing work. Like some of the story I've heard was like, wow, this is so great. Really make me want to collaborate with them. By now, we will see 5 letters describing their stories of change. 4 of them accepted to be interviewed by Quetzal to get more insight on their journey. 2 of them accepted to be interviewed by Comic Relief for some press opportunities. Every female survivor obviously filled feedback form on their experience as well. Few survivors said that they were happy to be involved in the Breaking the Silence initiative in the capacity of volunteers or collaborators. It created a lot of important discussion at Quetzal. And we did stick to our policy, which is a requirement to take a year to process counseling prior to engaging with Quetzal. We are so gracious and humbled, by them sharing their story with us. But I think we thought that, 16 weeks of counseling is not a quick fix to the trauma of child sexual abuse. They are all welcome to come back if they feel that they need more support after 4 months, and they need at least a year to process what had happened before they are mobilized to give more of themselves to the project. So it will be interesting in 1 year time to engage with them and have conversation. I did speak with the survivor that I met at the beginning of the process about the project, the idea of engaging with our network of females she engaged with. And we've both agreed that it would be best to give it time and later on maybe reconnect and do a collaboration. So the story of change is never over. So yeah, at the end of year 3, we had 24 referrals from South Asian female survivors. We also saw an increase in the number of South Asian female coming from other parts from Leicestershire as well. The counselor indicated that the new clients she's seeing now are a lot younger than the female survivors she engaged with to start with. And obviously there is other challenge that those females are experiencing, especially, in their choice on whether they're going to continue with family tradition or break away from it. So it's a very interesting conversation, reflection that she's shared with us. And yeah, through the pandemic, Quetzal experienced a 60% increase compared to previous year of 16 to 24-year-old engaging with Quetzal. So thank you, to all the work that we've been doing. So this is absolutely great. And we also achieved the same level of referral than the previous year, despite the pandemic restriction. So it really, really worked. So in terms of the key learning from the community-based approach, it is effective, very rewarding, it demands capacity. The more time we spend collecting the stories and mapping out our connections, assets, and gifts, the better. Sharing the story on a central website, support dissemination by volunteers and collaborators. The volunteers are very autonomous in the sense that I'm always reminding them, oh, we've got this new on our website, and then they use their creativity to develop content using their creativity, and this is fantastic. Having a core group to map out the communities is most appropriate to create shared ownership of vision, add very strong connection with certain collaborators, such as Kajanisha Patel from Lightseeker, I repeat again, but also staff within Quetzal and certain counselor. But I think having a core group work even better. My last comment is to plan time at the end of the project, any initiative or any event, to update your map of assets and resources. So about the story of change, with the story of change and feedback, we were able to produce with Nikhil Mistry and its team. So yeah, I want to thank a big thank you to Nikhil for a wonderful collaboration we started prior to the pandemic, when we didn't even have the letter at the time. we share some ideas. And also a big thank you on behalf of Quetzal and all the female survivors we support. Yesterday, Nikhil did a 12-hour charity gardening broadcast so that we can continue providing free counseling and raise awareness. So thank you. So about the stories of change, we've taken the letters written by female survivors as well as feedback on Quetzal and of counseling form. A selection of the letter and feedback was made. We made some slight modification on the letters so that they could remain anonymous. I purposefully chose not to find out any details about the female survivors who wrote the letter, their age, their religion, ethnicity, or any others. I just wanted to be attached to their story first. I made a call for volunteers to participate who identified as Asian from their ethnicity. We also chose, so the people who came is the people who wanted to be part of it. We also chose not to name the video with a first name, so that we, it's more of an universal story. And so we have now 2 stories of change, 1 word of change, which is a shorter version of the story of change, on 6 social media clips. So with no further ado, let's watch them.
I was stuck in the past and was looking for answers and trying to make sense of dysfunction and evil. I suffered with PTSD as a result of decades of narcissistic abuse from a child to an adult. My father attempted to ruin 3 female lives. He wanted power and control over our lives, and if we broke the rule, he would use various methods to make us comply. It was like living in a war zone. There was no peace, but lots of abuse, bullying, degradation, so he could reign a tyrannical rule over us just because we were female. The Catholic faith counsels us to forgive people, but I believe even God cannot forgive what my so-called father did to my disabled, innocent, vulnerable sister. He raped her when she was 13, while I was at school and Mum was in hospital. As soon as I left the dysfunctional, nightmarish existence, I started to heal day by day. I experienced normality, respect, and most importantly, peace. I recognised who my real friends are, the ones who helped stand by me and save my life. With my counsellor's help, professionalism and expertise, I was able to unlock barriers that held me back in the dysfunctional past. I was able to mourn the loss of my childhood, full of responsibility for my disabled sister and my absent father. Counselling helped me to rise like a phoenix from the ashes, heal, empower me and recognise that I was a perceptive, self-aware, resilient person and not to be held back by anyone. I recognise the importance of self-care, and learning to love yourself is the greatest love of all. There is nothing like turning your key in the door and experiencing peace. I may not have had a good start in life, but I am determined to spend the rest of my life in peace and wisdom.
Starting my journey, I came with baggage. The angry little girl within me was lashing out at family members who turned their backs on me or anyone who tried to show they were in control. Also, as a very independent, outspoken British South Asian woman with a very strong personality, I know I come across as a tough cookie. I do not show my inner emotions and will always put up a self-defense mechanism when anyone has shown interest in me and tried to cross the line. If anyone got close to me, I'd end up pushing them away due to trust issues. All this was my baggage that grew with me since the sexual abuse at 8 years old by an older cousin. All this made me a very reactive person. I was always labelled as having a very short fuse. This affected relationships, be it with family or friends. However, the therapy sessions helped me become a more reflective person. I was always one to react over the slightest matters. When my best friend and daughter noticed the changes in myself where I would not react, it actually was a feeling of accomplishment. I learnt the value of sincere long-term friendships who were my support mechanisms before I started my journey with Quetzal. The therapy has helped me to take into account family members who did not support me, who kept me silent and did not acknowledge that I was a victim, and even with my ever so strong personality, that I sometimes needed the emotional support that's leading me to feeling disappointment and anger. Finally, I can say that I am at peace with myself. Although some matters remain unresolved, I am in the process of putting my points forward via writing to avoid conflicts when face-to-face or when speaking on the phone. I know once this is done, I will feel a huge sense of relief and burden lifted from my shoulders. Again, without the amazing therapy sessions, I could not have done this with the thought process I now have, all thanks to my therapist. The tools she has given me, I feel I can deal with the challenges life throws at me. My therapy journey at Quetzal has been an eye-opener, life-changing in connection to my relationships with those who are close to me and about myself. It truly has been a learning curve for me, which I know will keep growing with the tools I have acquired from the valuable therapy sessions.
Words of change. I spent many years seeing different counsellors, but none of these people specifically dealt with abuse. Then in 2020, I was referred to Quetzal, and wow, what a difference they have made in my healing. The counselling I received has finally helped me to deal with the abuse, find my voice and confidence to move on with my life. I really encourage other Asian women to not suffer in silence and take the leap and seek help. An enormous thank you to my wonderful counsellor for believing in me and providing me the encouragement and support I so desperately needed. You are a good listener. You have challenged me. Together, we have found links in my behaviour to my past. I have been able to open up with you, and I instantly liked my counsellor. You allowed me to gain trust. I feel safe during the telephone sessions, and it really worked for me.
I have become more visible in the world. I am more comfortable with myself. I have dealt with so much, and I have grown as a person. Counselling has given me a chance to process my life. I have found it easier to do counselling as I am able to control the space and the safety of it.
I have had a safe space to be able to verbalise my concerns. It's allowed me to be more comfortable with myself, and it enabled me to be able to talk more easily to others about my past. During COVID-19, telephone sessions were easier for me and a nice transition to face when I returned to university.
My life has been a roller coaster during therapy. Being able to verbalize my difficulties has been a support. I felt safe attending sessions during COVID-19.
It has given me a lot of peace and insight into my life. The change is that now I look forward in life and have stopped looking at the past. I can now recognize negative people and behaviors. I also have learnt that life is precious. I would totally recommend Quetzal. It's made me find my own answers and has allowed myself to start to heal. Without a counsellor, you are isolated. Talking to someone gave me relief. My confusion has shifted and I don't feel judged.
So the next step of the project. So between now and then, we will continue. The project ended February 2022. We will continue to develop relationship, collaborate, and self-mobilize through association and with the support of our volunteers and volunteer connectors. I'm rekindling with sport leaders. It is now easier now that we have a positive story to tell. I look to deepen relationship with the ADA project, which provide multilingual counseling in Leicester. Other partners such as Trade, Jasmine House and Turning Point are also specifically looking at engaging with diverse communities in Leicester and South Asian female. I've also a small image of a play here called Positively Shameless, delivered by a theatre group based in Bangalore, India. They are coming in 2023 in the Netherlands, and I want them to come to Leicester. So always trying, maybe developing more relationship with the art as well, the artistic community in Leicester. Between July and September 2021, you are invited to take part in our consultation process to define our next step. So please do not hesitate to send me an email or subscribe to our newsletter to be the first one to know about it. And then between September and November 2021, we have an evaluation process with an external evaluator to review our improved methods, evaluation and learning. And then in February 2022, we will launch our final report with an associated webinar. I will close the meeting then. And hashtag Quetzal Stories of Change. And thank you for everyone for being here today. And yeah, please share the word. And let's hope that we can continue the story together as a community here in Leicester and beyond.